Welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. I'm Roberta Foster, and today I welcome Connilyn Cossette to Author's Corner. She's written the novel Voice of the Ancient, which is published by Bethany House, and she'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Let me tell you a little bit about Connilyn. She is a Christie Award and Carroll Award-winning author whose books have been found on ECPA and CBA bestseller lists. When she's not engulfed in the happy chaos of homeschooling two teenagers, devouring books whole, or avoiding housework, she can be found digging into the rich, ancient world of the Bible to discover gems of grace that point to Jesus and weaving them into an immersive fiction experience. And so, Connilyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, one of the questions I've asked of other biblical historical novelists is about your love of history. Did you find you delved into historical writings because of your love of history, or did you just like to write stories?
I think it began with my love of history.
Okay.
I didn't actually start writing until I was in my mid-30s, just kind of a lack of confidence and knowing how to get started. And so I was just studying history on my own, and I was trying to understand the foundations of our faith and understand the ties between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so I started studying the Exodus in depth and studying the historical context around what was going on during that period of time. And because I got fascinated with that, a story came to my mind, and that kind of started it all.
And so, as a person that picks up a novel to read, what do you think readers gain by diving into the history of our faith?
Well, I think we can understand it in its original context, which I think just gives a deeper, richer layers about the Word and the understanding of, who Jesus was and the context that he was born into. And so, the Bible itself is a Hebrew document. And so I think understanding the background of that just gives us so much more of a connection to the history and the people that witnessed those events.
Well, this is not your first novel. You have written a variety of them already. So give us a little insight into your new book, Voice of the Ancient. And it is book one in the series, King's Men series.
Yes, that's correct. And this is the first of a 4-book series. And it takes place during the early years of King Saul's reign. And so each one of those books is from the point of view of one of the 4 cousins, who, although they're not old enough, and a couple of them shouldn't even be anywhere near a battlefield, have run away from home to go fight for the new King Saul that they're very excited about. And so it's going to span a number of years. One of the cousins goes missing in the first book, so there's a bit of a mystery thread that will pull through all 4 books.
Okay. And so is there anything that you were reading or something that inspired you to write this particular series of books?
Nothing really in particular, other than I had written a series called the Covenant House series that takes place at the end of the Judges period. And I just fell in love with the family that I was writing about, and I just didn't want to leave them alone. And so I ended up doing a spin-off. And so the 4 heroes of this new series are children in the last series. So I just wanted to kind of dive into that period of time. Most people kind of skip over King Saul, I think, and we just go right to David because, it's King David. But I thought it'd be fun to just slow down and take a deeper look at that transitional period during Israel's change from being under judges to being under kings.
So why don't you share a snapshot of the beginning of King Saul's reign, this period in which your novel is written?
Well, I think it was a time when there was a lot of confusion. The Bible says at that point in time there was no king and everybody was just doing whatever they wanted to do. And so I think that it was a time of upheaval for the tribes. They had been doing their own thing for hundreds of years after coming into the land of Canaan and running their own show, so to speak. And so going from 12 tribes that really were separated geographically as well, and the Shiloh, the spiritual center, had been destroyed. There was no more tabernacle. The Ark of the Covenant was hidden away, and so the central worship that had been in place was gone. And so I think it was just a time of trying to fit a lot of people under one banner. And I think King Saul had quite a big job to do in that. And there was a lot of jealousy. There was always, from the beginning, the 12 sons of Jacob were always kind of at each other's throats. And so I don't think that ever changed. So I think it kind of was just heightened during this period of time.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the main character, the one of four but the main character that you're writing about in your book. Actually, I guess you've got two of them, and I'm not going to try to pronounce their name. I'll let you do that first.
Sure. Well, the hero of the book is named Avidan, and he is the son of a Levite. So he's grown up in a family that is very focused on music and sacred worship, and he does not want anything to do with music. He's got a tin ear. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He really just wants to go fight battles and be a warrior. But then when he does end up doing that, it maybe isn't quite what he expected it to be. So his strength is as a storyteller. And so during the course of this book, he's going to learn how to use that storytelling gift for the Lord. And then Keziah is the heroine, and she's a young woman who's being forced into a marriage with a pretty bad guy. And she decides to run away, and she's got to dress as a young boy to get away and to be safe, and she ends up crossing paths with Avidan. So it's kind of her journey toward understanding who Yahweh is, because she grew up worshiping idols, even though she was a Hebrew.
All right. Well, that leaves us with just a great cliffhanger right there for just a moment. We're talking today with Connilyn Cossette regarding her book, Voice of the Ancient, which is published by Bethany House. And it is book one of a 4-book series called The King's Men. And it's published by Bethany House. You're listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. Well, one of the things you point out in the materials is that Avidan is actually the eldest son of a Levite and a Philistine. And so without giving too much of your story away, that sounds like a really strange mix.
It is. Avidan's mother, Eliora, is actually the heroine of the first book in my Covenant House series.
Okay.
And that series focuses on two children who, after the Philistines stole the Ark of the Covenant and everything went haywire for them, and they said, send that thing back. They put it on a wagon and sent it back to Hebrew territory. These two young children follow the Ark of the Covenant, and they end up being adopted by a Hebrew family.
Okay.
And so that's why she's a Philistine, but she became part of Abraham's family through a covenant.
All right. The thing I enjoy about biblical history novels is that the writer oftentimes includes some great spiritual insights or challenges for us as we read the novel. So can you give us some insight into the lessons that your main characters go through that can help us in our Christian walk today?
Absolutely. Well, I think the theme of this book is learning to worship the one true God.
Okay.
You know, we tend to want, we cry out for our own kings and our own desires and our own wants, just like Israel did. And I think learning to bow our knee to the one true God and to submit our own will and our own desires to what he has planned for us is kind of the general theme. Okay. So I think that is absolutely applicable to every single one of us today.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so this series is different from your other biblically based novels, and so tell us how it differs, so that as people pick up your book and say, well, this is not what I know Connilyn Cossette for.
Well, it's similar in a similar vein, and actually all of my books tie together. Even from the very first one, I have little ties all the way through. And so the first series takes place during the Exodus of Egypt and goes all the way through the fall of Jericho. And then my second series is the Cities of Refuge, which focuses on the cities of refuge in Joshua 20 that are a place that someone who accidentally kills someone can run to and be safe. And then the third series is the Covenant House series that centers around the Philistine children. So they have a similar tone, and they're all written from the point of view of witnesses to the events in the Bible, not necessarily a Bible character's experience within the Bible. So I kind of always written from an outsider point of view.
Well, that was one of the things I found interesting, is that your novels are not based on some of the main characters of the Bible, but that you actually develop fictional characters who witness biblical events. And so that seems a little different from many other authors. Yeah,
it just gives me a little bit more white space to write, kind of writing between the lines and trying to figure out, when these things happen, an Egyptian person watching the plagues happen, what were they thinking? How were they processing what was going on without knowing, what Moses was doing or, what God was doing? They didn't have the Bible to look at and read and figure out what's going on. So I always thought it would be interesting to look at that from that point of view of what is happening and how am I finding what the truth is and who God is through these things.
Well, we know that this is book one of a 4-book series, but give us a little teaser about the next one coming up.
Well, the next one is another of the cousins, and it's going to be a few years later, and he is going to be sent out by King Saul to not only find soldiers for his army, but also artisans and people that can help build his kingdom. And unfortunately, the young woman he comes across is a wonderful perfumer, and she does not want to go. So he's going to have to figure out a way to get her to go.
All right. Okay, so Connilyn, tell us how our readers can connect with you and find out about other books you've written.
Sure. Well, you can find me online at ConnilynCossette.com, and I do have a periodic newsletter that goes out to talk about upcoming releases and giveaways and just kind of background things that are going on with me. And I can be found on Facebook, Connilyn Cossette. I also have a private Facebook group called Connilyn's Bibliophiles. And that's just a fun place where people can kind of connect with me on a deeper level and get some behind-the-scenes kind of things. And we're going to be talking about the biblical feasts coming up here soon. So I invite anyone to come join us there.
All righty. So one more time, the book today is Voice of the Ancient, Book 1 of the King's Men series. And we've been talking with Connilyn Cossette, and we certainly thank Bethany House, a division of Baker Publishing Group, for giving us a copy of the book to talk about today. And Connilyn, thank you so much for sharing your passion for writing books with our listeners today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
And if you missed, as a listener, if you missed any of today's interview or would like to hear it again, you can now find it on your favorite podcast provider. Join us again next time on Author's Corner. I'm Roberta Foster.
The world is in chaos, and you're here for a purpose. What does the Bible have to say about it all? I'm Mark Taylor, host of Crosspoint podcast and radio show, and I'd like to invite you to join me each week as I navigate the complexities of faith, culture, and personal growth. Each week, I interview a different guest who is making an impact on the culture for God's kingdom. Whether you're seeking spiritual guidance, true information, or a fresh perspective, this podcast equips you to discern truth in today's chaotic world. When Christianity intersects with everyday life, that's where you'll find Crosspoint, sometimes discussing the issues that some churches don't want to talk about. Look up Crosspoint with Mark Taylor wherever you get your podcast, produced by KNEO Radio and the Sky High Podcast Network.